Hello. I guess I should say up front that I'm new here, so be patient with me, and I don't know all the rules or etiquette and whatnot. A friend of mine linked me to this board after I told him the story and showed him the materials I'm about to share with you. He thinks some of you will appreciate it, but to be honest, from where I'm sitting, the site seems more like a haven for idiots than a serious paranormal image board. Whatever. I'm motivated to share this stuff and need to do so anonymously, for reasons which will become clear. Technically, I'll be breaking the law, but if I understand how this place works, this thread will disappear in a day or so anyway. Here's the deal. I'm a production editor at a small independent publisher in the US. I won't say which or where, so don't ask, as I'd like to keep my job. The pay isn't real great, but it's an easy gig, and I like the people I work with. A lot of what we publish are what you would call coffee table books. The kind people flip through when they're bored, but no one ever reads cover to cover. Bland pictorial histories of certain cities or states that sell well in regional gift shops. The occasional book of maps or a biography. A few museums outsource their gallery catalogs to us, that kind of thing. The work is boring, but it's steady and we get enough jobs and our books make enough money to stay afloat, which is a lot more than most little presses can say these days. Because we've been around a while, our name is somewhat known to history buffs who think that they're an expert on such and such town in nowhere, Idaho, or some esoteric topic that nobody really cares about. We get a lot of unsolicited manuscripts from people that really shouldn't be writing books, and unsolicited CDs full of photographs from people that shouldn't be taking pictures. Because we're small, we don't have a separate acquisitions editor position. The job of going through this slush pile gets passed around the office. Very rarely, someone will find something worth pursuing and pitch it to the rest of us, but our senior editor-publisher gets the final say. For the last 9 months, I've been working more or less non-stop on a book that everyone at the office was pretty excited about. Our copy editor found it during his turn with the pile. An old guy I won't name contacted us out of the blue and offered us a chance to publish his rare archival photo collection, provided that we treat the subject with the respect and seriousness that he felt it deserved. To use his term and what was going to be in the book's title, the photos were all anomalies. That is to say, they depicted something out of the ordinary or otherwise inexplicable, something that usually had an equally interesting story to go along with it. Most of them were from the first half of the 20th century. Like I said, it's not the kind of thing that we normally publish, but the few samples the guy sent in with his pitch letter were pretty compelling. And once we had seen the rest of them, heard a few of the stories, and realized that none of these pictures were widely known, we knew we had something that would get people's attention. The format was going to be simple and classy, with a lot of white space and breathing room. Each photo would appear as a high-quality print on the right-hand page, followed by a blank left page, and then a couple of paragraphs to caption each photo on the following right-hand page. From the very beginning, the guy was a nightmare to work with, and the job took forever because he refused to send more than one document at a time. He would send me certified mail, I would get it, scan it, and mail it back certified, and only then would he send me the next one. He seemed to think he had an extremely valuable collection and was highly paranoid about losing it, so he only risked one item at a time. In the end, we spent so much money in mailing costs that it would have been cheaper for me to fly out to where the old guy lived with a scanner and a laptop. We were maybe a third of the way through the production process when the fucking guy pulled the rug out from under us. Someone had offered him a large sum of money for the photos, way more than what we were offering for the book rights, on the condition that the book gets shit-canned and the photos stay out of the public eye. We demanded that he come in for a face-to-face and tried to reason with him and cater to his pride and desire for scholarly acclaim. And for a few days it seemed like it had worked. But when I got back home, he flip-flopped again and started cursing me out and my senior editor on the phone, demanding that we shelve the book. He hired a lawyer who came up with some BS to void his contract, and then he threatened us with a lawsuit that would bankrupt us if we went ahead with the project but lost. To add insult to injury, the law firm sent this annoying little IT guy to our office to make sure that the materials were wiped from our computers. Because the vast majority of it existed on my machine, and I spent literally months of my life on this project, I felt, and still feel, the most violated and bitter about the whole thing. Somebody should benefit from all that work, hence my reason for coming here. Unfortunately, I don't have the high-resolution scans that I made from the photos, but I did keep working drafts of the original captions and 14 medium-red placeholder thumbnails that Quark created as I was laying out the original version of the book. Don't ask me why we were still using Quark. It's what we know and it's what we paid for a long time ago. I'm not supposed to, but I occasionally take home the working Quark files to tweak on my home machine. The full file, with the full resolution pictures embedded, gets way too large and unwieldy to bring home with me. Most of the time I'm just experimenting with fonts and layout options anyway. But I don't embed the images until the end. Anyway, after all this shit went down, I discovered that I had a working file on my home machine of what we had done so far. So I printed to PDF and then stripped the text and images from that PDF file. You folks will be beneficiaries of that. Just to be clear, I don't claim anything with regards to the veracity and provenances of these pictures. I'm not here to convince you they're real. I'm just putting them out there because I think they deserve to be seen and not hidden in some rich prick's private collection. Photo 1 of 14, the Collinwood Fire. This is the last known photo taken inside the Lakeview School in Collinwood, Ohio before it was consumed by fire on March 4th, 1908, killing 172 students, 2 teachers, and 1 rescuer. The fire started when a ceiling joist ignited from a nearby steam pipe. Flames blocked exit routes, leading to panic and a stampede that trapped a large number of victims in the stairwell, where they were cooked alive. Additional casualties were incurred when the burning students jumped from the 2nd and 3rd story windows. Everyone in the photo perished, except for Mr. Olsen sitting in the far right in the back row. The spectral artifacts in the photo remain unexplained. Photo 2 of 14, Charlie Noonan's last interview. Charlie Noonan was an amateur folklorist who traveled through the South and Southwestern United States during the early years of the 20th century, collecting tall tales and stories of the supernatural. According to his wife Ellie, Charlie was told a story one day by an Oklahoma farmer about a strange woman who lived alone on an isolated property in the Panhandle. The farmer claimed the woman was not a woman at all, but something else. Something that hid its true nature beneath a headscarf and had never been seen without a large dog by its side. Noonan was apparently intrigued enough to try searching for the woman during one of his research trips. He was never seen again. Ellie Noonan was later contacted by a Tulsa pawnbroker who remembered reading about her husband's disappearance in the papers. After finding his name engraved on a camera sold to him by an itinerant, the pawnbroker returned the camera, and Mrs. Noonan had the film inside developed in hopes of finding a clue as to his whereabouts. There was only one photo on the roll. Unfortunately, neither the location of the property nor the name of the farmer who told him the story was recorded in Noonan's notes. Photo 3 of 14, the death of John Olstad. This prophetically torn photograph depicts a regimental color guard of the Union Army, 1 month before they marched into the battle at Antietam, September 1862. The gentleman on the far right, named John Olstad, had the right side of his face and right arm blown off by a cannon fire at the start of those hostilities. It is unknown exactly when the damage to the photo occurred. Photo 4 of 14, the Axman of New Orleans. Eduardo Artel was an unsuccessful French photographer and inventor who traveled throughout the U.S. during the first 2 decades of the 20th century, trying to drum up interest in investors for a device that added timer and automatic exposure features to a Kodak's popular line of folding Brownie cameras. During his travels, he took thousands of automated pictures to test and refine his invention. Often he would wake up early, set up a hidden camera in an inconspicuous spot on the streets of whatever city he happened to be in, and then walk to a nearby cafe or bar so he could capture candid scenes of daily life to remember his travels by. The best of these photos were selected for Martel's one and only gallery show in Paris, 1924. Unfortunately, Martel died penniless and unknown in 1955, and it was left to his daughter Jeanne to sort through the boxes and boxes of photos he left behind to see what should be kept and what should be discarded. During this process, she came across this photo, taken in New Orleans on the morning of October 28, 1919, a few hours before Martel boarded a steamer ship to return to France. It turns out that Martel hated motion blurs in his photographs because he thought it would reflect badly on the speed and accuracy of his lens mechanism. This prejudice made him cast aside and overlook what was probably the most important photo he ever took. What makes this photo special? The night before it was taken, the notorious and still unidentified serial killer known as the Axman of New Orleans had committed his last murder, hacking Mike Pepitone to death in his bedroom and then fleeing the scene just as Pepitone's wife was discovering his body. Could this be him returning to his residence? It's impossible to say. Photo 5 of 14, the Grand Caverns cryptids. This photo was taken in 1895 by an amateur spelunker photographer named Orrin Jeffries while exploring an unmapped section of Grand Caverns in southwestern Virginia. At the time it was taken, Jeffries was conducting photographic experiments, using super long exposures to see if anything at all could be captured in the total absence of light, otherwise known as cave darkness. He would situate himself on ground level, extinguish his lantern, and then open the lens of his homemade box camera for as long as he could stand the darkness. During one of these experiments, he heard something approaching from the deeper recesses of the cave. Frightened, Jeffrey abandoned his experiment and set off one of the blitzlicht flashes he used to take traditional photographs underground. According to the report he later gave to a local newspaper, Jeffrey saw 3 humanoid creatures staring at him from the shadows and took off running in the other direction and didn't stop running until he was topside. Several days later, he returned with 3 other men to retrieve his box camera. This is the image that was recorded on the film inside. Photo 6 of 14, the Harlow Twins. 1938, Evergreen Park, Illinois, outside Chicago. Billy and Stevie Harlow were riding in the front seat with their mother Tammy when their Ford sedan collided head-on with a Chrysler. During the collision, the cars spun in such a way as to impact 2 additional vehicles. Tammy Harlow survived, but the boys were ejected through the windshield and killed instantly. A crime scene photo from a local paper took a shot as a crew of volunteers worked frantically to free John Downing, the driver of the Chrysler. It appears that Billy and Stevie stuck around to watch. Photo 7 of 14, the Sorensen Tragedy. The Sorensens were a Danish family who immigrated to the United States sometime between 1905 and 1906. They arrived with their eldest child, Anders, seen on the donkey, and settled on a farmstead in Missouri. 3 more children, Simone, Frick, and Mathilde, center, right, and on the wagon respectively, soon followed. This photograph, taken in 1916, captures all 4 of the children a few weeks before the tragedy. The 3 eldest kids were apparently playing fort in the hay barn and must have fallen asleep. Their father Nicholas drove a wooden hay sweep into the pile and dismembered all 3, in locations accurately suggested by the flaw in the photo. Mathilde, the youngest child, was inside the house with her mother at the time and was not hurt. According to the son of a neighbor later interviewed by the author, the donkey later died in an equally horrendous fashion by getting its head caught in a barbed wire fence and nearly decapitating itself in a frenzy to get free. This final detail could not be corroborated. Photo 8 of 14, the Spectre of Viola Peters. Viola Peters was a well-born spinster who lived alone in a small rural town in McKaysville, Georgia. She was much loved in her community for her charitable contributions to the Baptist church, the soup kitchen, and the local orphanage, especially during the Depression when those institutions subsided almost entirely on her largesse. In July 1935, Viola was brutally raped and murdered by a drifter named Tom Cullen, who had worked briefly at a nearby copper refinery. Cullen proceeded to stay on in Viola's house and savage her corpse for an additional 17 days before he was caught and captured. A posse of enraged locals stormed the county jail, took Cullen, and lynched him from an old bridge over the Toccoa River. This photo was taken by Garrett Killian, a witness to the lynching, and caused quite a stir when it was published a few days later in the Atlanta Constitution. To most, it suggested that Viola's spirit achieved some measure of peace by attending her killer's execution, but some twisted minds saw in her forlorn countenance a longing to get one last look at her one and only lover. Photo 9 of 14, the Ghost of Sara Eustace. Danvers State Hospital, formerly Danvers State Lunatic Asylum, was a Kirkbridge-style psychiatric hospital built in 1874 on what was then an isolated site in rural Massachusetts. Like all Kirkbridge asylums, it was famous for its Gothic architecture and its use of now outdated medical techniques to treat insanity. Danvers is often cited as the birthplace for the prefrontal lobotomy. Danvers has several other claims to fame. It was the inspiration for the fictional Arkham Sanatorium that appeared in several stories by H.P. Lovecraft, and which, in turn, inspired Arkham Asylum, in the fictional Batman universe. It was also where the cult horror film Session 9 was filmed. That film put the vast network of tunnels beneath Danvers to good cinematic effect. It's no accident the filmmakers chose to use the tunnels, as rumors of their hauntings had dogged Danvers for over 100 years. The most famous story concerns Sara Eustace, a patient who escaped her ward in 1955 and snuck into the tunnel system. Despite multiple searches and a week-long lockdown of the asylum, Sara was never seen again. It was assumed that she died down there, lost, thirsty, and alone. A nurse at Danvers named Gail Malloy became obsessed with Sara's story and spent many of her off hours searching the tunnels for her remains. Though she never found a body, she did snap a photo in late 1966, which suggests that Sara Eustace walks the Danvers tunnels to this very day. Photo 10 of 14. The Stevenson Family Portrait. Who says ghosts don't have a sense of humor? The Stevensons were a wealthy Boston family, proud of the industry and longevity with which most of the clan was blessed. This portrait, taken in 1945, was an effort to gather the oldest Stevensons together with one of the youngest. Amelia, center, aged 102, was granted the honor of matriarch, while little Ophelia was the token child at 18 months. What the Stevensons did not realize until the photo was developed was that they had been joined that day by one of their deceased. James Pullman Stevenson, 1835 to 1932, seated at left between his niece Ginny and his cousin Alfred, was easily identified by several of those present and remembered fondly as a rascally uncle known for his pranks and dirty jokes. Photo 11 of 14. The Disappearance of Mrs. Yorno. During her later years, Josephine Yorno would take a walk every evening at dusk around her beloved neighborhood in Norwich, Connecticut. On November 12, 1935, she set out as usual and never returned. Extensive searches were conducted by a large team of volunteers and the Norwich police force, but no sign of her was ever found. 3 years later, Mrs. Yorno was found squatting in front of a neighbor's house without a mark on her body and in perfect health. When asked where she had been, Mrs. Yorno was unable to understand the question. From her point of view, no time had passed at all. Against the advance of her neighbors and her doctor, she refused all medical treatment and resumed her life as if nothing had happened, including her nightly strolls. Another neighbor snapped this shot of her in the fall of 1938. Clouds of smoke from piles of burning leaves gives it an appropriately eerie feel. On the same date in November 1940, 5 years after her initial disappearance, Mrs. Yorno vanished again. This time, she was never seen again. Photo 12 of 14, The Fate of Sally York. The 1912 threshing of little Sally York, age 9, in the cotton loom of the North Folk Textile Mill was one of a handful of accidents that helped legislators push through the Keating-Owning Act of 1916, the first child labor law in American history. From the time of the accident until the mill's closing 4 decades later, workers consistently complained of cold spots, strange noises, and sudden taps on the shoulder when no one was near. The mill's foreman never paid these complaints any mind until the photograph surfaced in 1932. It was taken by a traveling photographer named Benny Johnson, who promptly sold it to the Norfolk Gazette for an unprecedented $10. The mill had shut down for the Christmas holidays and was empty at the time. The photo was later blamed for the closing of the mill, though the Great Depression was the more likely cause of that. Photo 13 of 14, Lily Palmer's Eyes. Lily Palmer was not quite 4 when she experienced what the doctors would later call acute onset of sensory hallucinations. This photo, taken by Lily's mother Annette on Halloween night, 1952, purportedly captures the arrival of her disorder. Lily and her Filipino nanny were setting out for a round of trick-or-treating when the child suddenly screamed and began clawing at her eyes. It was some time before she was calm enough to speak, but when she was asked what she saw, Lily repeatedly spoke about things crawling in her eyes. Several days later, while unsupervised in her bedroom, Lily punctured both of her eyes with one of her mother's knitting needles. After receiving both medical treatment, she was evaluated and committed, and remained institutionalized for the rest of her life. First at Bellevue on the east side of Manhattan, and later at the Rockland Psychiatric Center in Orangeburg, where she later died of a heart attack in March 2001. A call to one of her former caregivers at Rockland confirmed that Lily's episodes were more traumatic on and around Halloween night, but for the majority of her life, she could be heard begging and pleading with the staff to help her get these things out of her eyes. Photo 14 of 14, the Trinity Deception. This is one of several photographs taken of the first ever nuclear detonation, conducted by the U.S. Army on July 16, 1945, in the White Sands Proving Ground. The setting of this implosion-designed plutonium device ushered in the atomic age and the eventual arms race between the United States and Russia. Only a handful of people were aware that this photo was cropped before it was ever released to the public, and they're all now dead. One of them was the original photographer, who gave the author a copy of the original on the condition that it was kept out of the public eye until such time that the citizens of the world could handle the ramifications of what it depicts. The author remains uncertain whether the criteria has been met, but given that he likely owns the last existing copy, he has decided his responsibility rests with the truth. Thank you everyone for listening. This story was a little different because it contained 14 different stories, all of which have their own pictures. Some of the stories or pictures may not make sense, but if you have questions, I encourage you to go to the link in the description and ask the author themselves. If you have theories or anything like that, I'm sure they would appreciate your involvement. I don't do a lot of these end slates, but I wanted to let everybody know of social medias that I have. If you guys want to follow me, ask me questions, give me suggestions, anything, you can follow me on Twitter, my Facebook page, all in the description, as well as my Patreon page. It really helps me out if anybody wants to support my channel. I don't have any sponsors or supporters, things like that, but I'd really love to make more high quality, longer videos for you guys, and one day I'd like this to be a career of mine. So anything you can give, I really appreciate it, even if it's just a suggestion. Again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.